Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General, for your willingness to step forward once again to serve this country. My thanks to your family for their sacrifices and service as well. General, as you know, the Next-Gen OPIR satellite program is one of the key components of our future missile warning architecture, along with the proliferated constellations of smaller satellites operating in lower orbits. Your predecessor, General Raymond, testified in support of this approach before this committee in May, but I'm concerned about discussion of alternative proposals that have not been developed with input from the combatant commands and would ultimately accept greater risk in the mission of the department that the department itself describes as no-fail. I hope this is something you'll take a look at and ensure that we continue to pursue a diverse architecture of complementary constellations that meets the warfighter needs for capacity and schedule. Do I have your commitment on that?
Yes, ma'am. As you mentioned, missile warning is no-fail mission, and bridging that transition for new capabilities, legacy capabilities, so we have no gaps in coverage is a high priority for me.
Thank you. I know the Space Force is in the process of designing the requirements for Phase 3 of the National Security Space Launch Program. Do you see Phase 3 as being more of an evolution of Phase 2 or a revolution in terms of its structure and capabilities?
And I'll be honest, ma'am, I haven't really dug into the details of what that strategy proposes. I have had some briefings in preparation for this, and so I would offer there was a great deal of effort that was put into going out across all of the stakeholders and getting as many inputs as possible so that the strategy would at least learn the lessons of the previous phases of national security space launch, not ignore those lessons and bring those forward into Phase 3. I think keeping a fair, open competition to make sure as many providers, both established launch providers as well as emerging launch providers, was also a key element of the strategy being devised. And I think that they're on the right path. We'll see as we get closer to the final decisions on how that strategy plays out. But if confirmed, I look forward to getting inputs from all the committee members as well as the other stakeholders in this critical mission set for the Space Force.
There has been some criticism of the program, particularly its use of block buys and certified providers. But I want you to know this committee understands the importance of maintaining assured access to space, especially for the most challenging orbits. We want to take advantage of the private sector's innovation. You talked about that earlier. But we are talking about unique and very expensive payloads that, if they are not delivered perfectly, it will result in capability gaps for our warfighters. So we understand there has to be a balanced approach to that risk. When you say that you want to include all stakeholders, give me examples.
Certainly all the launch service providers, certainly the people whose payloads we're putting on orbit, certainly the acquisition community has to balance contracting requirements, cost profiling, all of the key considerations when you put an acquisition strategy together, procurement strategy together, making sure that all those variables are accounted for so that we can thread the needle to get the balance that you just mentioned right. There's risk to mission, but there's also cost overruns that we want to avoid. Spending too much for these required mission sets is something that's on my mind. And so I think we just need to pull as many of those key opinions from all the stakeholders together to make the wise decision for the strategy going forward.
And how do you balance the risk?
It's a challenge because it has to be a no-fail mission. We have to be able to put the payloads we need into the orbits that we require. But we need flexibility across that. So it's this balance between mission assurance and flexibility, which is always a conundrum for military planners. But I think the best way to do it is just to have open, deliberate debates about what the merits are on both sides and make sure you try to get it as close to perfect as you can.
Okay. Last question. Can you talk about how the Space Force has made changes to deliver capabilities faster so that it's more responsive to the needs that we face, such as restructuring of Space Systems Command, and how you plan to build on these steps to ensure our space enterprise is responsive to both threats and technological changes.
With the help of Congress, we established the Force Design Architect in the Chief of Space Operations. The Joint Requirements Oversight Committee gave us responsibility as the DoD integrator. This is allowing us to streamline the requirements development. And if we get the requirements just right, it sets us on the right path for the major acquisition programs. We're also considering exploiting what we have and then the commercial capabilities that we can buy as a complement to those major acquisition programs that we have to build from scratch. Through those processes, I think we've streamlined at least the early phases of that larger, complicated acquisition process.
When you look at these reforms, what benchmarks do you look at in order to determine success or measure success?
The classic acquisitions are cost, schedule, and performance, but for me, it's about delivering a full set, a full-throated capability that gives us both the mission agility to do the job, sustainability over time. Just because it works today in a dynamic environment against a dynamic threat, it may not work in the future. And so I'm looking at always being able to provide a capability to the President, to the combatant commanders, that give them flexibility in execution of their mission set. So it's the readiness of the force to meet that broad spectrum of anticipated threats that I'm looking for as a measure of effectiveness.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Fischer. Senator Rose.